They didn't know who she was. They saw a woman in a dark hoodie standing alone near the edge of the bleachers. Average height, baseball cap pulled low. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening. And beside her a dog. Not barking, not pulling at a leash. Just sitting there with the kind of stillness that most people mistake for obedience. But this wasn't obedience. This was something else entirely. The dog's name was Ranger, 7 years old. 82 pounds of Belgian Malinois muscle wrapped in a tactical vest that read in clear block letters, "Do not pet." Working canine. His eyes moved constantly, tracking, calculating, a drone overhead, a stroller wheel catching on grass, the metallic clink of a firefighter's badge across the field. But his body never twitched. He was ready, at rest, but never off. And the woman beside him, the one they thought was just another dog owner, enjoying a sunny afternoon at the Riverton Community Fair, she was watching too. Her name was Kira Holloway, 32 years old, former United States Navy, and for 7 years she had been one of the most effective K-9 handlers in the history of naval special operations. But they didn't know that. Not yet. 22 months earlier, the air had tasted like dust and copper. Spin Boldak, Afghanistan, 3 clicks from the Pakistan border. The compound rose from the desert like a scar mud walls and rusted metal, a Taliban stronghold that intelligence had flagged for months. Inside, somewhere in that maze of dark rooms and darker intentions, was a man who had been feeding American forces information about weapons caches along the border. The mission was simple. 4-person team, extract the asset, get out before dawn. Kira had run dozens of operations like this one. Different compounds, different targets, same rhythm, breach, clear, secure, extract. This one should have been routine. Should have been. The night vision painted everything in shades of green as they moved through the outer courtyard. Kira's M4A1 was up suppressor, attached every step measured and silent. Behind her, Frost and Keegan covered the flanks. Their breathing was controlled, their movements synchronized, but it was Ranger who led the way. His body stayed low, almost liquid, flowing through the shadows like smoke. His nose swept the corners before they reached them. His ears rotated like satellite dishes, picking up frequencies the human ear couldn't detect. Room 1, clear. Ranger's body language said it before Kira's eyes confirmed it. Empty, cold. They moved on. Room 2, clear. Sleeping mats on the floor, teacups with residue still inside, but no bodies, no threats. Room 3, clear. The compound felt abandoned. Too abandoned. Kira's instincts prickled, but she pushed forward. The asset was supposed to be in the back. They were running out of time. Room 4. Kira approached the doorway. Standard procedure. Ranger would enter, first sweep the space, give the all-clear signal. She'd follow. They'd done this 100 times, but this time Ranger stopped. Dead. His entire body went rigid. Not the alerting posture she'd trained him for. Not the sit or the scratch that meant explosives detected. Something different. And then he did something he had never done before. He backed up, directly into Kira's path. His body became a wall. 82 pounds of muscle and bone pressing against her legs, forcing her backward. Kira's heart rate spiked. She tried to step around him. He moved with her, blocked her again. Not aggressive, not disobedient, immovable. Frost saw it from behind. "Handler, your dog's acting off." Kira knelt, put her hand on Ranger's shoulder. His muscles were tight beneath the fur. His breathing was shallow, but he wasn't alerting. He wasn't sitting. He wasn't scratching. He was just standing there, refusing to let her pass. "Check the door," she whispered to Keegan. Keegan moved up with a handheld UV light. He scanned the frame, the hinges, the floor. Then he froze. "Pressure plate," he said, his voice barely above a breath. "Under the carpet edge, right where you would have stepped." Kira looked down. Her boot was 4 inches from the trigger, 4 inches from stepping on 8 pounds of homemade explosive compound. Ammonium nitrate mixed with aluminum powder, ball bearings and roofing nails packed around the charge for maximum fragmentation. Blast radius 12 feet. In that enclosed space, unsurvivable. The IED was a modified pressure release device. Step on, nothing happens. Step off, detonation. And Ranger had known. Somehow he had known. But instead of giving his standard alert, which would have required Kira to move closer to confirm he had improvised, he had used his body as a barrier. He had kept her back until the humans could figure it out themselves. The technical debrief came 2 days later. The intelligence officers used words like unprecedented and adaptive behavior. They said no military working dog in recorded history had ever deviated from trained protocol in exactly this way. But Kira didn't need their analysis. She knew what had happened. Ranger had saved her life. He had saved all 4 of their lives. And when the Navy offered her a promotion afterward, new assignment, new dog, standard rotation after a close call, Kira had refused. "I owe him the rest of his life," she had told her commanding officer. "He gave me mine." So they had retired together, left the war behind. But the bond that had been forged in that dark room 4 inches from death, that came home with them. And it would never fade. The grass at Riverton Community Field hadn't been this green in weeks. Maybe it was the morning drizzle that had passed through before dawn. Maybe just timing, but something about the afternoon air felt crisp, almost too perfect for a public event. Folding chairs lined the perimeter of the open turf. Booths for the fire department, the EMT tent, and a handful of local food vendors framed the edges like mismatched parade floats. Children ran between bubble machines and cardboard fire trucks. Adults browsed pamphlets about smoke detectors and CPR classes, nursing paper cups of lemonade. No one noticed the woman in the dark hoodie standing just beyond the bleachers. No one noticed the dog sitting at her side with perfect posture, eyes tracking every movement source within a 50-yard radius. Kira adjusted her baseball cap and checked her phone without moving much else. A message from her sister. "We moved up, going on in 10. A blurry photo followed showing a clump of 10-year-olds in matching yellow t-shirts. One of them vaguely resembled her niece Ainsley if you squinted past the motion blur. Kira exhaled through her nose and typed back, "On my way, taking the back path." She clicked her tongue once, barely audible. Ranger shifted his paws forward by exactly 4 inches, eyes still watching, still calculating. A familiar voice called out from behind. "Didn't expect to see you here." Kira turned to see Ellie Barrett, an EMT she had worked with during wildfire season 2 years ago. Now in civilian clothes, sipping an iced tea, her posture relaxed in a way that came from knowing the day's emergencies belonged to someone else. Kira offered a faint smile. "Didn't expect to be here. My niece's school is doing a performance thing." Ellie glanced down at Ranger. The dog hadn't acknowledged her presence. His attention remained fixed on the crowd cataloging potential concerns that didn't exist yet. "Still working?" "Observation today," Kira said. "Exposure hours, civilian integration." Ellie nodded slowly. "He still doesn't let anyone touch him." "Not unless I say so," Ellie grinned. "Can't blame him. Most people around here think handler means you walk dogs for fun." Kira didn't respond to that. She just watched the field. Across the grass near the concession tents, 4 young men were shoving each other playfully, swiping free stickers off the sheriff's booth, laughing at something on one of their phones. They weren't loud enough to cause concern, just disruptive in that way young men sometimes were when they thought no one was paying attention. But Ranger noticed. He didn't growl, didn't shift dramatically, just leaned the smallest fraction toward Kira's left side, positioning himself between her hip and the general direction of the disturbance. Kira clocked the adjustment, filed it mentally. She didn't react. "I should go find my niece," she said to Ellie. "Good seeing you." "You too. Stay safe out there." Kira moved toward the shade beyond the main field, checking her phone again for updates. Ranger followed without a sound, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. Like he was always there, not guarding, just anticipating. The dog didn't need a leash. He had something stronger, loyalty, built in dust and fire, in far worse arenas than this one. The narrow walkway behind the old locker rooms was quieter than the main field. Gravel crunched beneath Kira's boots as she cut along the maintenance path. This route wrapped around the back of the bleachers and reconnected near the performance canopy where Ainsley's class would be singing. Fewer people, less noise, Exactly what Ranger needed for his civilian exposure training. But as she turned the corner past the edge of the portable buildings, voices rose ahead, loud, casual, too loud for the empty path. Four figures emerged from the opposite end of the walkway, the same group from the concession area. Kira recognized them immediately. The body language, the swagger, the way they moved like they owned whatever space they occupied. The one in front was older than the others, mid to late 20s. Hoodie sleeves rolled to the elbows, baseball cap turned backward, something cold in his eyes that the casual smile couldn't quite hide. His name was Donovan Mercer, 27 years old, former United States Army, discharged 3 years ago under conditions that never made it into public record. The official paperwork said, conduct unbecoming. The unofficial truth was darker. Donovan Mercer had been assigned to a military working dog unit at Fort Campbell. During a training exercise, one of the dogs had bitten him. Not badly, just a warning snap during a scenario that Mercer had escalated beyond protocol. But Mercer hadn't taken it as a warning. He had taken it as a challenge. 3 days later, that dog was dead. Blunt force trauma to the skull. Mercer claimed it was an accident, a fall during training. But the veterinary examiner's report told a different story. The angles were wrong. The injuries were wrong. Everything was wrong. The Army buried the investigation, gave Mercer a quiet discharge, let him walk away with nothing on his record except a few vague words about unsuitability for continued service. But men like Donovan Mercer don't just walk away. They carry their darkness with them, and they wait for opportunities to let it out. Behind Mercer, 3 younger men followed. Colton Webb, 22 years old, lean build, nervous energy that he tried to hide behind a tough guy slouch. There was something haunted in his eyes, something old. Garrett and Bennett, early 20s, followers, the kind of men who attach themselves to stronger personalities because they had never developed one of their own. They were laughing at something on Garrett's phone when they spotted Kira and Ranger blocking their path. Mercer noticed first. His eyes went to the dog, then to the vest, then to the woman. Something flickered across his face. Recognition. Not of Kira specifically, but of what Ranger represented. A military working dog. The same kind of animal that had humiliated him 3 years ago. The same kind of animal he had killed. Well, well, Mercer said, his voice carrying the length of the walkway. Look at this. Kira didn't stop walking, didn't break stride, but she adjusted her path slightly toward the right, giving them space to pass. Ranger mirrored the move perfectly, positioning himself between Kira and the group. Body relaxed, eyes sharp. Just passing, Kira said, voice neutral, eyes forward. Mercer stepped into her path. You don't have to be in such a hurry, he said. We're all friends here. Garrett snickered. Bennett raised his phone slightly, angling it toward them. Kira stopped. Ranger stopped. The walkway suddenly felt narrower than it was. Nice dog, Mercer said. He wasn't looking at Ranger. He was looking at the vest, reading the words. Do not pet. Working canine. His lip curled. Working canine, he repeated. What's he work as a professional couch potato? Bennett laughed. Garrett kept his phone up. Colton Webb stayed silent. His eyes moved between Ranger and Mercer with something that looked almost like unease. Kira kept her voice even. He's in civilian training. We're just passing through. Civilian training. Mercer took a step closer. That what they call it now? When these mutts get too old to be useful, they slap a vest on them and pretend they're still special. Ranger didn't react. Not a muscle. But his weight shifted, almost imperceptibly, preparing. Kira felt it through the ground. We don't want any trouble, she said. Just let us pass. Mercer smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. Trouble. He glanced back at his friends. Who said anything about trouble? I'm just curious about your dog. That's all. He reached out, slowly, his fingers extended toward the edge of Ranger's vest. Kira's voice dropped a register. Still calm, but with an edge now. Don't. Mercer paused. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. That a woman would speak to him that way. That anyone would speak to him that way. Then the surprise curdled into something else. He flicked the edge of Ranger's vest between two fingers, like it was a cheap costume, like it meant nothing. Relax, lady. I'm not scared of your little fashion accessory. Ranger didn't move. Kira didn't move. But the air between them changed. Bennett lowered his phone slightly, suddenly uncertain. Garrett's smile faltered at the edges. Only Colton Webb saw it clearly. The shift in Ranger's posture, the way his head lowered by a fraction of an inch, the way his breathing seemed to stop entirely. That wasn't a pet. That was something else. Donovan, Colton said quietly, maybe we should just go. Shut up. Mercer didn't look at him. His attention was fixed on Kira now. On the way she wasn't backing down. On the way she stood there like she owned the ground beneath her feet. It made him angry. It made him want to prove something. You know what your problem is, he said, stepping closer. You people with your special dogs and your special vests, you think you're better than everyone else. But you're not. You're just playing dress up. Kira met his eyes. Step back. Or what? The question hung in the air. Kira didn't answer. She didn't have to. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Mercer moved, fast, deliberate. His hand came up and shoved Kira's shoulder. Not a punch, not a strike, just a shove, firm, full-bodied, dismissive. The kind of contact designed to move someone without words, to establish dominance, to prove a point. Kira's boots scraped against the gravel as she caught her balance. Her body absorbed the motion without stumbling. Her hands stayed at her sides. But Ranger saw it all. The moment her body flinched, he moved. There was no bark, no growl, no warning. Just speed. His body exploded from stillness into motion with a precision that seemed almost mechanical. 82 pounds of trained muscle slicing diagonally across Kira's hip, intercepting Mercer's position with surgical accuracy. The sound that followed wasn't dramatic, just the soft thud of a controlled clamp. Ranger's jaws locked around Mercer's forearm, not biting, not tearing, holding, pinning, just enough pressure to freeze every nerve in place, to immobilize without injury. Mercer's knees buckled instantly. The shock didn't come from pain. It came from the sheer unnatural efficiency of it. One moment he was standing chest-puffed, hand extended in dominance. The next moment he was sitting hard on the gravel, eyes wide, mouth open, trying to make sound but not remembering how. Garrett stumbled backward, dropping his phone. It clattered face down on the gravel. Bennett's face went white. Colton Webb stood frozen, staring at Ranger with an expression that was equal parts terror and something else. Recognition, like he was seeing something he had heard about once long ago in a different life. Kira's voice cut through the silence. One word. Ranger, out! The dog's jaws loosened in a blink. Mercer's arm dropped, unharmed, save for the pressure prints beginning to bloom across the skin like ghost fingerprints. Ranger didn't bark, didn't advance. He simply recentered himself in front of Kira. Tall, square, silent, guard position. His breathing was elevated but controlled. His eyes scanned all four men like they were coordinates instead of people. Assessment complete. Targets neutralized, awaiting further instruction. The silence that followed was heavier than the commotion. Mercer didn't try to stand. His breathing came in short, ragged gasps. His arm hung limp at his side, unmarked, except for those strange pressure patterns that would fade within the hour. But the shock in his eyes wouldn't fade. Not for a long time. What the hell? Bennett's voice cracked. What the hell was that? Nobody answered. Garrett scrambled for his phone. The screen was cracked now. He didn't seem to notice. Colton Webb hadn't moved. His eyes were still fixed on Ranger, but something in his expression had shifted. The fear was still there. But beneath it, something else was surfacing. Understanding. A few people had gathered at the walkway's edge now. Parents, teenagers, a couple of event staff members in bright orange vests. Nobody was talking. Nobody was filming. Everyone just stared at the dog standing guard in perfect stillness. His breathing was slow, measured. His ears tracked every sound within a 30-yard radius. But his body remained absolutely motionless. And that stillness was more frightening than any snarl could have been. The old man appeared without warning. He emerged from behind the small crowd like he had been there all along. watching, waiting, gray hair beneath a faded marine ball cap that had seen better decades, a cane in his left hand worn smooth at the grip from years of use, a jacket with a patch on the shoulder that most people wouldn't have recognized. But Kira did. K9 unit, military working dogs. The patch showed a German Shepherd silhouette against a crossed sword emblem. Retired. The man stopped at the edge of the gathered onlookers. His eyes weren't on the crowd. They weren't on Mercer, still sitting stunned on the gravel. They were on Ranger. He studied the dog for a long moment. The posture, the breathing pattern, the precise angle of the head. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. That dog, he said to no one in particular, isn't from any department in this city. The firefighter who had stopped to watch glanced over. You can tell. The old man didn't answer right away. He took 2 more steps forward, slow, measured. The crowd parted slightly to let him through. Then he addressed Kira directly, not with challenge, with recognition. Ma'am, he said gently, you Navy. Kira met his eyes. She saw the patch, the posture, the way he moved despite the cane. She saw 35 years of service written in the lines of his face. Former, she replied. The man nodded slowly. His voice dropped to a register that only Kira could hear. Handler Special Operations. Kira didn't blink. Joint Command. The old man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Respect. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small card. Plain white, black text, a phone number and a name. Colonel James Hartley, USMC retired. If you need a witness statement, he said, I'm available. If you need anything else. He paused. People like us should look out for each other. Kira took the card. Thank you, Colonel. He nodded once. Then he turned to look at Mercer, still sitting on the gravel, still trying to process what had happened. The colonel's expression hardened. Son, he said, his voice carrying now. I served 35 years in the K9 Corps. Desert Storm, Iraq, 3 different continents. I've seen thousands of military working dogs in my career. He paused. That dog right there. He pointed at Ranger with his cane. That's SEAL training, the highest level of discipline in the world. He could have taken your arm off at the shoulder. Instead, he held you like you were a package that needed signing for. Mercer's face went pale. You should thank God that woman has the training she has, the colonel continued, because the only reason you're sitting there with all your fingers attached is because she chose not to let him do what he's capable of. The crowd murmured. Garrett and Bennett exchanged glances. Colton Webb stared at Kira with something new in his eyes. Not fear anymore. Awe. The police arrived 6 minutes later. 2 officers, 1 male, 1 female, both in their mid-30s. Both already reading the body language of the scene before they'd asked a single question. The female officer approached Kira first. Ma'am, can you tell us what happened? Kira walked her through it. The walkway, the confrontation, the shove, Ranger's response. She kept her voice level, factual, let the details speak for themselves. And after your dog released the defendant, what happened? I gave no further commands. Ranger returned to guard position. We waited for police to arrive. I declined to press charges. Why did you decline? Kira paused. She looked at Mercer, who had finally gotten to his feet. His arm showed no visible injuries. The pressure marks had already begun to fade. Because no one was seriously injured. Because I believed the situation was resolved. Because I thought he might learn from the experience. The female officer raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Kira stepped toward Mercer. The crowd went still. Ranger stayed in position, but his eyes tracked her movement. Ready? Always ready. Kira stopped 3 feet from Mercer. Their eyes met. Next time you put your hands on someone, she said, her voice quiet but caring, make sure they have the ability to walk away, not the discipline. Mercer didn't respond. His friends didn't respond. Nobody responded. The officers took statements, names, contact information. A woman from one of the vendor booths came forward with phone footage, clear, time-stamped, showing exactly what Kira had described. When the officers finished, they nodded to Kira and walked Mercer's group toward the parking lot, not in handcuffs, but not as free men either. Something had changed. Everyone who had witnessed what happened knew it. Colonel Hartley waited until the crowd dispersed. Then he approached Kira one more time. "You handled that well," he said. "Most people would have let their dog do more." "He didn't need to do more." "No, he didn't." The colonel paused. "That's what makes him special. And that's what makes you special. The restraint." Kira looked at Ranger. The dog had finally relaxed his posture. His eyes found Kira's face. Patient, trusting, mission complete, handler safe, standing down. "He's the special one," Kira said. "I just try to keep up." Colonel Hartley smiled. The first genuine smile she had seen from him. "I've been doing this for 35 years, he said. "I've seen a lot of handlers say that about their dogs, but I've only seen a handful who actually meant it." He extended his hand. Kira shook it. "Keep my card," he said. "Kira, was it?" "Yes, sir." "Keep my card, Kira. Something tells me this isn't over." He glanced toward the parking lot where Mercer and his friends were climbing into a pickup truck. "Men like that," the colonel said quietly, "they don't learn lessons. They hold grudges." Then he turned and walked away, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the concrete. Kira watched him go. She looked down at the card in her hand. Then she looked at Ranger. "Come on, boy, let's go find Ainsley." The performance canopy was crowded by the time they arrived. Rows of parents sat in folding chairs. Children in matching yellow t-shirts fidgeted on a makeshift stage. A teacher was adjusting a microphone stand that kept tilting to the left. Kira spotted her sister near the front row. Jessica Holloway, 38 years old. Worried eyes. The kind of woman who carried the weight of every possible catastrophe in her shoulders. And next to her, bouncing with anticipation, was Ainsley. 9 years old. Bright eyes. A smile that could light up a room. Kira made her way through the crowd and sat down in the empty chair beside her sister. Jessica's relief was visible. "What took you so long? You said you were taking the back path." "Got held up." "Held up by what?" Kira glanced at Ranger, who had settled into a perfect sit beside her chair. "Long story." The performance started before Jessica could ask more questions. 23 children sang slightly off-key versions of songs about community helpers and working together. Ainsley's voice rang out louder than the others, her enthusiasm making up for any lack of pitch. Kira watched her niece. Watched the joy on her face. Watched the innocence that didn't know about pressure release IEDs or dark corridors in Afghanistan or men who killed dogs because they could. She reached down and rested her hand on Ranger's head. He leaned into her touch. For a moment, everything was quiet. Everything was safe. The drive home was silent. Ranger lay in the cargo area of the SUV, his head resting on his paws. His eyes tracked passing cars out of habit, but his breathing had finally slowed to a resting rate. Kira's hands were steady on the wheel, but her mind kept drifting back. To the walkway. To Mercer's face. To the way he had looked at Ranger with something darker than hatred. Recognition. Like he had seen that kind of dog before. Like he had unfinished business with that kind of dog. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from an unknown number. She glanced at it at the next red light. The message was simple. "Kira Holloway, Navy SEAL K9 handler. I know who you are now, and I know where you live." No signature, but she didn't need one. She knew exactly who it was from. The light turned green. Kira set the phone down and kept driving. Behind her, Ranger's ears had perked up. He couldn't read the text, but he could read her, and whatever was coming next, they would face it together, the same way they always had. That night, after Ranger had settled into his bed beside her, Kira sat in her kitchen with a glass of water she didn't drink. The house was a small 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just enough space for her and Ranger. The backyard was fenced. The neighbors kept to themselves. It was exactly what she had needed after 7 years of shared barracks and forward operating bases. But now it felt different. Now it felt exposed. She pulled out Colonel Hartley's card and stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and dialed the number. It rang twice. "Hartley." "Colonel, it's Kira Holloway from the fair today." A pause. "I had a feeling I'd hear from you." "What happened?" Kira told him about the text. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Then Hartley spoke. "That man, Mercer, I made some calls after I left the fair. He's got a history." What kind of history? The kind that doesn't show up on background checks. But people remember. Hartley's voice grew heavier. He was discharged from the Army 3 years ago. K-9 unit at Fort Campbell. There was an incident with one of the dogs. Kira's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of incident? The dog bit him during a training exercise. Nothing serious. But Mercer didn't take it well. 3 days later, that dog was dead. Blunt force trauma. They ruled it an accident. But anyone who looked at the evidence knew better. Kira closed her eyes. He killed the dog. Yes, and the Army let him walk. Quiet discharge. No charges. Nothing on his record. Hartley paused. Men like that, Kira, they don't change. They don't learn. They just wait for another opportunity. And now he has one. He thinks he does. Hartley's voice hardened. But he made a mistake today. He went after the wrong handler. And the wrong dog. Ranger shifted in his bed across the room. He was watching her, eyes calm, body still, waiting. What do I do? She asked. First, you document everything, that text, any contact, anything unusual. Second, you stay alert. Third, Hartley paused. You let me help. I don't need help. It's not about need. His voice softened. It's about not fighting alone. I've been where you are. Different war, same enemy. The kind of enemy that doesn't wear a uniform and doesn't follow rules. Kira was quiet for a moment. Why do you want to help me? Because I've spent 35 years training handlers and watching them come home broken. Because I've seen too many good people get destroyed by men who should have been stopped long before they became dangerous. He paused. And because that dog of yours deserves better than to spend his retirement looking over his shoulder. Kira felt something loosen in her chest. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Good. I'll come by tomorrow. We'll talk. Make a plan. Thank you, Colonel. Call me Hartley and get some sleep. You're going to need it. The line went dead. Kira set the phone down. She walked to Ranger's bed and knelt beside him. His head came up. His eyes found hers. She placed her hand on his neck, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath the fur. We're not done yet, she whispered. Are we, boy? His body pressed closer against her palm. Steady, warm, unwavering. That was answer enough. Outside, the California night settled over Riverton like a blanket. Stars appeared one by one above the quiet streets. Somewhere across town, in a pickup truck parked outside a rundown apartment complex, Donovan Mercer sat in the darkness, staring at his phone. The video Garrett had captured before dropping his phone was shaky and low quality. But it was enough. Enough to see Ranger's speed. Enough to see Kira's control. Enough to remember the humiliation of being brought to his knees by a woman and her dog. His arms still tingled where Ranger had held him. No marks, no injuries. Just the memory of those jaws. Just the knowledge of what could have happened. What should have happened. Mercer set the phone down. His hands were shaking. Not with fear, with rage. You think this is over? He muttered to the empty truck. You think you won? He stared out the windshield at the darkness. It's not over. It's just beginning. 3 days passed. The sun rose and set over Riverton like nothing had happened. Like a woman hadn't been shoved in broad daylight. Like a military working dog hadn't demonstrated the kind of precision that most people only saw in movies. But Kira knew better. She knew that silence after violence was never really silence. It was waiting. The coffee shop on Maple Street was nearly empty when she arrived. A Tuesday morning, most people were at work. The only other customers were an elderly couple sharing a muffin by the window and a college student with headphones buried in a laptop. Colonel James Hartley was already seated in the back corner. He had chosen the table with the best sightlines. Back to the wall. Clear view of both entrances. Old habits from old wars that never fully faded. Ranger walked beside Kira with his head up and his ears rotating. The coffee shop was new territory. New smells, new sounds. But his body language remained calm. Assessment mode, not threat mode. Hartley stood when they approached. He was wearing civilian clothes today. Khakis and a button-down shirt that looked like it had been ironed by someone who remembered when that still mattered. But his posture was pure military. Straight spine, squared shoulders, eyes that missed nothing. Thank you for coming. Kira said as she sat down. Wouldn't have offered if I didn't mean it. Hartley lowered himself back into his chair, his cane resting against the table edge. How are you holding up? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Kira paused. She looked at Ranger, who had settled into a perfect sit beside her chair. His eyes were on the door. Always on the door. I haven't slept well, she admitted. Keep thinking about that text. Hartley nodded slowly. I made some more calls, he said. Talked to some people who knew Mercer during his time at Fort Campbell. The picture isn't pretty. Tell me. Hartley leaned forward slightly. Donovan Mercer enlisted at 22, scored high on aptitude tests, got assigned to the military working dog unit because they thought he had potential. He paused. He didn't. What happened? First 6 months, nothing unusual. Standard training, standard performance. But his handlers started noticing things. The way he talked to the dogs, the way he looked at them when he thought no one was watching. Kira felt a chill settle into her bones. Like they were enemies. Like they were obstacles. Things to be controlled, dominated. Hartley shook his head. The K-9 Corps isn't like regular infantry. You can't force a dog to trust you. You have to earn it. And Mercer didn't understand that. Didn't want to understand it. So when the dog bit him, it wasn't aggression, it was defense. The dog sensed what Mercer was, what he was capable of, and it tried to warn him, tried to establish a boundary. Hartley's jaw tightened. Mercer saw it as a challenge, an insult. 3 days later, he took that dog to an isolated part of the training compound. What he did there. The colonel's voice dropped. The veterinary examiner said the injuries weren't consistent with any kind of fall or accident, but the Army didn't want a scandal, didn't want questions about their screening process, so they buried it. Kira's hands had formed fists beneath the table. They let him walk. They let him walk. Quiet discharge, clean record, and now he's out here, in the civilian world, with nothing to stop him. Ranger shifted slightly. He had sensed the change in Kira's body language, the tension radiating from her shoulders, the acceleration of her heartbeat. She placed her hand on his head. He settled. What do you think he's going to do? She asked. Hartley was quiet for a moment. Men like Mercer don't process humiliation the way normal people do. To him, what happened at the fair wasn't just embarrassing. It was a wound, a deep one. And wounds like that, they don't heal. They fester. You think he'll come after me? I think he already is. That text wasn't a threat. It was reconnaissance. He wanted you to know that he knows where you are. He wants you scared, off balance. I'm not scared, Hartley smiled grimly. I know you're not. That's what worries me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I've been doing this for 35 years, he said. Training handlers, evaluating dogs, building programs that save lives. And in all that time, I've learned one thing that matters more than anything else. What's that? Partnership? The bond between handler and dog. It's not just about commands and obedience. It's about trust, communication, understanding. He unfolded the paper. You and Ranger have that. I saw it at the fair. The way you work together, the way you think together. It's rare, precious. Kira looked at the paper. It was a printout, an email from someone with a Navy domain. I made a few calls to some old friends, Hartley continued. They're impressed by what they've heard about you. About Ranger, there's a new program being developed. National standards for military working dogs transitioning to civilian life. They need people who understand what that transition really means. Kira read the email slowly. They want me to participate. They want you to help build it. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. Ranger has to pass a civilian certification evaluation. New protocol, required for any retired MWD entering public-facing roles. 5-member board, temperament test, stress scenarios, the whole thing. Kira frowned. Ranger's already proven himself, in ways that board members can't possibly understand. I know, but bureaucracy doesn't care about battlefield experience. They care about liability, documentation, checkboxes. Hartley paused. And there's something else you should know. What? The board chair. Dr. Margaret Hayes. She's a civilian, psychologist, specializes in trauma assessment. Hartley's voice dropped. 15 years ago, her son was killed in a friendly fire incident overseas. A military working dog was involved. The handler lost control. The dog attacked the wrong target. Kira's chest tightened. She blames the dog. She blames the system, the training, the idea that we take animals and turn them into weapons and then pretend they can be trusted. Hartley leaned back. She's not wrong to have concerns, but she's predisposed to see danger where there isn't any. And if Ranger fails her evaluation, then none of this matters. Then none of this matters. Kira looked at Ranger. He was still watching the door, still cataloging every person who entered and exited, still doing the job he had been trained to do. When's the evaluation? 10 days. And in the meantime, Hartley's expression hardened. In the meantime, we prepare, and we stay alert, because Mercer isn't going to wait 10 days. He's going to move, and when he does, we need to be ready. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed. Ranger's head turned. A young man walked in, early 20s, lean build, nervous energy that he was trying hard to hide. Kira recognized him instantly. Colton Webb, one of the men who had been with Mercer at the fair, the one who had stayed silent while the others laughed, the one whose eyes had shown something different when Ranger demonstrated what he was capable of. Colton scanned the room. His gaze landed on Kira. He hesitated. Then he walked toward their table. Hartley's hand moved casually toward his jacket. Old instincts, ready for anything. But Kira held up her hand. Wait. Colton stopped 3 feet from the table. His face was pale. His hands were trembling slightly. But there was something in his eyes that Kira hadn't expected. Shame. Ma'am, he said quietly. I know I don't have any right to be here. After what happened, after what we did. But I needed to find you. I needed to say something. Hartley's eyes narrowed. Say it, Kira replied. Colton took a breath. I'm sorry, what Donovan did, what we all did, it was wrong. I knew it was wrong while it was happening, but I didn't stop it. I just stood there. And I've been thinking about that every day since. His voice cracked. I've been thinking about your dog, about the way he responded, the way he didn't attack. He could have torn Donovan apart, but he didn't. He just held him, controlled him, and then let go. Ranger was watching Colton now, not with aggression, not with suspicion, with assessment. I've never seen anything like that, Colton continued. I didn't even know dogs could do that. I thought military dogs were just weapons, trained to bite and attack. But that's not what I saw. I saw something else. Something, he struggled to find the word. Disciplined? Hartley offered quietly. Colton nodded. Disciplined? Yeah, like a soldier. A real soldier. Not like Donovan. Not like any of us. He looked at Kira directly. My brother was in the Marines. Corporal Jake Webb. He was a K-9 handler. Fallujah 2006. He and his dog were killed by an IED. Same blast. Same moment. Kira's expression softened. I was 4 years old when it happened, Colton said. I don't remember much about Jake. Just pictures, stories. But I remember being angry. For years. At the Marines. At the war. At everything that took him from us. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I started hating military dogs because one of them was the last thing Jake ever saw, the last thing he ever touched. I thought if they hadn't been there, maybe Jake wouldn't have been there either. Maybe he'd still be alive. Ranger made a small sound. Not a whine, not a growl, just acknowledgement. Colton looked at the dog. But when I saw Ranger at the fair, when I saw what he did and what he didn't do, I started thinking about the stories Jake used to write in his letters home. About his dog, about how they trusted each other, how they would die for each other. He blinked rapidly. Jake didn't die because of his dog. He died protecting his dog, and his dog died protecting him. That's not a weapon. That's a brother. The coffee shop was silent. Even the elderly couple by the window had stopped talking. Kira stood slowly. She extended her hand. Colton stared at it for a moment. Then he shook it. You made a mistake, Kira said. Standing with Mercer, not speaking up. But you're here now. That counts for something. It doesn't feel like enough. It's a start. Hartley cleared his throat. "Son, what do you know about Mercer's plans? Has he said anything since the fair?" Colton's expression darkened. "He's obsessed, keeps watching the video from that day, keeps talking about how he's going to prove that military dogs are dangerous, that they're all dangerous, that they should be put down." "Does he have specifics?" "Not that he's shared with me, but I stopped hanging around him after the fair. The things he was saying, the look in his eyes." Colton shook his head. "There's something wrong with him, something broken. I don't think he's going to stop." Kira and Hartley exchanged glances. "Thank you for telling us," Kira said. "Can I do anything else to help?" Hartley studied the young man for a long moment. "You want to make things right?" "Yes, sir." "Then come by the training facility on Saturday, Riverton K9 Center on Pine Road. I'll show you what real handler work looks like. Maybe you'll learn something your brother would have wanted you to know." Colton's eyes widened. "You'd do that after everything? Your brother died serving this country. The least I can do is make sure his sacrifice means something to someone in his family." Colton nodded slowly. "I'll be there." He turned to leave. Then he stopped. "Ma'am," he said, looking back at Kira, "your dog, what's his name?" "Ranger." Colton looked at the Belgian Malinois. Ranger looked back. For a moment something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something that might one day become respect. "Ranger," Colton repeated. "That's a good name." Then he walked out. The bell chimed behind him, and the coffee shop returned to its quiet Tuesday morning rhythm. 6 weeks later, everything changed. The phone call came at 7:43 a.m. on a Thursday. Kira was in her backyard running Ranger through a modified obstacle course. Jumps, tunnels, direction changes, all designed to simulate the stress tests he would face during the civilian certification evaluation. They had been training together every day. Hartley came by most afternoons to observe and offer guidance. Colton had shown up that first Saturday and returned every weekend since. He had a natural instinct for working with dogs, something inherited perhaps, something that had been dormant for 18 years waiting to be awakened. The evaluation was scheduled for the following Monday, 4 days away. Ranger sailed over the final jump and landed perfectly. His breathing was controlled. His focus was absolute. He looked up at Kira, waiting for the next command. Then her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Holloway." "Miss Holloway, this is Officer Patricia Vance with the Riverton Police Department. We need you to come down to the station." Kira's blood ran cold. "What happened?" "There's been an incident. At the VA hospital. A service dog handler was attacked. The perpetrator matches the description of someone you filed a report about 6 weeks ago. Donovan Mercer." Ranger sensed the shift in her body language. He moved to her side immediately. "Is the handler okay?" "He's in the hospital, broken ribs, possible internal injuries. The dog sustained significant trauma to the front leg, required emergency surgery." Kira closed her eyes. "Mercer did this." "We believe so. We have witnesses, video footage. But we need your statement to establish a pattern of behavior. Your incident at the community fair may be the key to keeping him locked up." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up. Ranger was staring at her, his head tilted, his eyes questioning. "What now?" Kira knelt beside him. "He did it again," she said quietly. "He hurt someone else. Someone like us." Ranger's ears flattened against his head. He understood, not the words, but the weight behind them. "We're going to stop him," Kira continued. "Whatever it takes. We're going to make sure he never does this again." She stood. Ranger stood with her, and together they headed for the car. The police station was chaos. Officers moved between desks with folders and coffee cups. Phones rang constantly. Somewhere in the back, a man was shouting about his rights. Kira navigated the noise with Ranger at her side. Officer Vance met them in the lobby. Mid-40s, sharp eyes. The kind of cop who had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said. "The detective handling the case is this way." They walked through a maze of cubicles to a small interview room. Inside, a man in a rumpled suit sat behind a metal table. Detective Marcus Cole, tired eyes, gray at the temples, a wedding ring that had worn a groove into his finger from 20-plus years of wear. "Miss Holloway," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Please, sit." Kira sat. Ranger positioned himself beside her, alert, watchful. Detective Cole looked at the dog for a long moment. "That's a Belgian Malinois Right military working dog." "Retired," Kira said. "We both are." Cole nodded slowly. "I've read the report from the community fair incident. 6 weeks ago. Donovan Mercer shoved you. Your dog responded with a controlled restraint. No injuries. You declined to press charges." "That's correct." "Why?" Kira considered the question. "Because I believed it was an isolated incident. Because I didn't want to escalate. Because I thought he might learn from the experience." "Did he?" "Obviously not." Cole leaned forward. "The handler he attacked yesterday is named Robert Finch, 58 years old, Army veteran, served 3 tours in Iraq. He's been working with his service dog for 6 years. Therapy for PTSD. Cole's jaw tightened. Mercer approached him in the VA hospital parking lot, started harassing him about his dog. When Finch tried to walk away, Mercer followed. The confrontation escalated. Mercer struck Finch multiple times, fractured 2 ribs, ruptured his spleen. Kira felt sick. And when the dog tried to intervene, Mercer kicked it, repeatedly. The dog's front leg was shattered in 3 places. Surgeons managed to save it, but the dog will never work again. Ranger made a low sound in his throat, not a growl. "Grief. We have Mercer in custody," Cole continued. "Multiple witnesses, video from a security camera. But his lawyer is already arguing it was self-defense, that he felt threatened by the dog, that he has a documented history of trauma related to military working dogs." "That's insane. That's the legal system. Without a pattern of behavior, it becomes he said, she said. But with your testimony with the incident from 6 weeks ago, we can show this wasn't a one-time thing. We can show premeditation, intent." Cole slid a folder across the table. "Will you testify?" Kira didn't hesitate. "Yes. There's something else you should know." Cole pulled out his phone. "Mercer made contact with you after the fair incident. A threatening text message. You reported it, but we couldn't trace the source at the time." He showed her the screen. A new message. Sent from a different number, but the tone was unmistakable. "You think you've won. You think you can put me away. But I'm going to prove to the world what your dog really is. What all these mutts really are. Monsters in vests. Weapons waiting to go off. And when I'm done, everyone will see the truth." Kira stared at the words. "When did this come in?" "This morning, after we arrested him. He's using a contraband phone from inside the holding facility." Ranger's head had turned toward the phone. He couldn't read the words, but he could sense their weight. "He's not going to stop," Kira said quietly. "Even from jail. He's not going to stop. That's why we need your testimony. That's why we need to build a case so strong that no jury in the world would let him walk." Kira looked at Detective Cole. "What do you need from me?" "Everything. Your statement from the fair, the text messages, your background, Ranger's training history, everything that proves you're exactly who you say you are, and that Mercer is exactly who we know he is." She nodded. "I'll give you everything. There's one more thing." Cole hesitated. "The certification evaluation, the one for Ranger. It's still scheduled for Monday." "I'm aware. Dr. Margaret Hayes is on the board. She's also been following this case. The attack on Robert Finch, the injuries to his dog. She's been making statements to the press about the dangers of military working dogs in civilian spaces." Kira's stomach dropped. "She's going to use this against Ranger. I don't know what she's going to do, but I thought you should be prepared." Ranger moved closer to Kira, his shoulder pressed against her leg. "I'm here. Whatever comes next, I'm here." "Thank you, Detective," Kira said. "Is there anything else?" "Not for now. We'll be in touch about the preliminary hearing. And Miss Holloway, yes, what your dog did at the fair, the restraint, the control. That's not what Dr. Hayes saw when she lost her son. She saw chaos, violence, loss of control." Cole paused. "Maybe when she sees Ranger, really sees him, she'll understand the difference." "Maybe," but Kira didn't sound convinced. And as she walked out of the station with Ranger at her side, she couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest battle was still ahead. The evaluation room was cold. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in pale blue-white. The walls were bare except for a single clock that ticked loudly in the silence. 5 people sat behind a long table. 4 civilians in business attire reviewing folders and whispering to each other. One Navy officer in service khakis sitting slightly apart from the others, her expression unreadable. And at the center of the table, Dr. Margaret Hayes, 62 years old, gray hair pulled back in a precise bun, reading glasses perched on her nose, a face that had been carved by grief into something that looked like permanent skepticism. She didn't smile when Kira and Ranger entered. She didn't acknowledge them at all. She simply watched. Kira walked to the center of the room. Ranger moved with her, his posture perfect, his eyes scanning the faces behind the table. Assessment mode. No immediate concerns detected, but tension. Plenty of tension. "Miss Holloway," Dr. Hayes said. Her voice was flat, clinical. "Thank you for coming. Please be seated." Kira sat in the single chair facing the board. Ranger positioned himself at her left side. Still, alert, waiting. "Before we begin," Dr. Hayes continued, "I want to acknowledge the circumstances surrounding this evaluation. The incident at the VA hospital, the attack on Robert Finch and his service dog, the ongoing criminal case against Donovan Mercer." She removed her glasses. "I want you to understand that this board's decision will be based solely on the evidence presented during today's evaluation, not on media coverage, not on public opinion, and not on any personal feelings any of us might have about military working dogs in general." Her eyes met Kira's. There was no warmth there, but there was something else, fairness, or at least the attempt at it. "Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Very well. Let's begin with stage 1, basic obedience and temperament assessment." For the next 30 minutes, Kira put Ranger through his paces. Sit, down, stay, come, heel, each command in English, then in German, then in Dutch. Ranger responded flawlessly, no hesitation, no deviation. His body moved with the kind of precision that came from years of training and absolute trust in his handler. The board members took notes. Dr. Hayes watched in silence. "Stage 2, she announced. "Controlled stress scenarios." A door opened at the side of the room. A young woman entered with a toddler on her hip. The child was maybe 2 years old, clutching a stuffed bear, looking around with wide, curious eyes. Ranger's head turned toward them. His ears perked, but his body stayed relaxed. The woman walked toward Kira, moving within 3 feet of Ranger. The toddler reached out with a small hand, fingers grasping toward the dog's head. Ranger didn't move. He didn't lean away, didn't show teeth, didn't make a sound. He simply waited. The child's fingers brushed his ear. Ranger's body softened almost imperceptibly, a subtle shift that showed acceptance, not tolerance. The woman smiled and walked away. "Next scenario," Dr. Hayes called. A man in maintenance coveralls entered through a side door, carrying a metal toolbox. He walked directly toward Kira, letting the toolbox drop with a loud clang 3 feet from Ranger's position. The sound echoed off the walls. Ranger's ear twitched, just barely, a micro movement that most people wouldn't have noticed. But his body didn't tense. His head didn't drop. He didn't enter guard mode. He recovered in less than a second, and then returned to his calm, watchful state. Dr. Hayes made a note. "Stage 3, she said. Simulated threat response." A uniformed deputy stepped into the room. He was large, 6'4", 240 pounds, the kind of physical presence designed to trigger protective instincts. He walked toward Kira with purpose. Not aggressive, but not casual either. His hand reached out and pushed Kira's shoulder. Not hard, but firm. The same motion Donovan Mercer had used 6 weeks ago. Ranger's weight shifted, his head lowered by a fraction of an inch. A low sound emerged from his throat. Not a growl, not a bark, just vibration, warning. But he didn't move. He didn't lunge. He stayed in position, eyes locked on the deputy's hands, muscles prepared, ready, but waiting for the command that might never come. Kira's voice was calm, Ranger, stand down. The dog's posture relaxed immediately. The warning sound stopped. He returned to his seated position as if nothing had happened. The deputy stepped back, his eyes wide. That was incredible control, he said to no one in particular. Dr. Hayes didn't respond. She was staring at Ranger with an expression Kira couldn't read. One more test, the doctor said quietly. She stood. Slowly, deliberately, she walked around the table. The other board members watched with confusion. This wasn't part of the standard protocol. Dr. Hayes stopped directly in front of Kira, 3 feet away, looking down at the woman who had once been one of the Navy's most effective K-9 handlers. Miss Holloway, she said, I'm going to do something unexpected. I want to see how your dog responds to a genuine threat. Not a simulation, the real thing. Kira's heart rate spiked. Ma'am, I don't think that's advisable. Dr. Hayes moved, fast. Her hand shot out and grabbed Kira's wrist. Her fingers twisted, applying pressure. Not enough to injure, but enough to cause pain, enough to trigger a response. Ranger exploded into motion, but not forward. His body shifted to interception position, head low, eyes locked on Dr. Hayes's hands. Mouth open, teeth visible. He stopped 2 inches from Dr. Hayes's wrist. 2 inches, close enough to feel his breath on her skin. But no contact, no bite, no blood. Just perfect, terrible, beautiful control. The room was absolutely silent. Dr. Hayes stared at the dog. Her hand was still gripping Kira's wrist, but her fingers were trembling. That's enough, Kira said quietly. Ranger, out. The dog stepped back. He returned to his position at Kira's side. His breathing was elevated, his pupils dilated, but he was calm, controlled, waiting for the next command. Dr. Hayes released Kira's wrist. She stepped back slowly. Her face had gone pale. Miss Holloway, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you know why I grabbed you? No, ma'am. 15 years ago, my son David was serving in Iraq. He was part of a unit that worked with military working dogs. There was an incident, a breakdown in communication. The handler gave the wrong command. The dog attacked the wrong person. Her voice cracked. My son died with a dog's teeth in his throat. He was 23 years old. Kira felt the weight of those words settle over the room. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know the details. No, you couldn't have. Dr. Hayes took a breath. For 15 years, I've believed that military working dogs are too dangerous, too unpredictable, that the training that makes them effective in combat makes them unsafe everywhere else. She looked at Ranger, the dog who had stopped 2 inches from her wrist, the dog who could have taken her hand off and chosen not to. But that's not what I saw just now. Her voice was steady now, stronger. What I saw was discipline, control, a dog who responded to a genuine threat with precisely measured force and then stopped the moment his handler commanded. She returned to her seat behind the table. That's not what happened to my son, she said. That's the opposite of what happened to my son. Dr. Hayes looked at the other board members. I vote to certify. One by one, the others nodded. Certification approved, Dr. Hayes announced. Ranger is cleared for civilian integration work. Kira exhaled slowly. She looked down at Ranger. He was watching her, calm, patient, waiting for whatever came next. She placed her hand on his head. Good boy, she whispered. We did it. His body pressed against her leg, warm, steady, present. And for the first time in 6 weeks, Kira allowed herself to believe that maybe everything was going to be okay. But even as she walked out of the evaluation room with Ranger at her side, she knew the truth. Donovan Mercer was still out there, still planning, still waiting, and the real test was yet to come. That evening, Kira sat on her porch watching the sun set over Riverton. Ranger lay beside her, his head resting on her feet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Hartley. Heard about the evaluation. Congratulations. Now the real work begins. Pentagon meeting scheduled for next month. I'll be there as your advisor. We're going to change things, Holloway, starting now. She smiled. Then another message came through. From Detective Cole. Preliminary hearing set for Tuesday. Mercer's lawyer is pushing for dismissal. Says the evidence is circumstantial. We need you there. All of you. Kira looked at Ranger. He lifted his head, meeting her eyes. Whatever comes next, his gaze seemed to say. We face it together. Tuesday, she said aloud. We'll be there. The sun disappeared below the horizon. The stars began to appear. And somewhere across town in a holding cell at the county jail, Donovan Mercer sat in the darkness planning his next move. He didn't know yet that the woman he had targeted was about to become his undoing. He didn't know that the dog he despised was about to prove everything he believed was wrong. But he would learn. They all would. 3 months had passed since the evaluation, 3 months of preparation, documentation, legal briefings, depositions that stretched for hours. 3 months of watching Donovan Mercer's lawyer file, motion after motion, trying to delay the inevitable. But the inevitable had arrived. Today was the preliminary hearing. Today, everything would be decided. The courthouse stood like a monument to justice in the center of downtown Riverton. Gray stone walls, tall columns, American flags hanging motionless in the still morning air. The kind of building designed to make people feel small, to remind them that the law was bigger than any individual grievance. Kira arrived at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to begin. She wore dark slacks and a button-down shirt. Professional, understated. The kind of outfit that said she took this seriously without trying to make a statement. Ranger walked beside her. His vest was freshly cleaned. The words, "Do not pet and working canine," stood out in sharp black letters against the tactical fabric. His posture was perfect. His eyes were calm. But beneath that calm, Kira could sense his alertness. He knew something important was happening. He always knew. Colonel Hartley was waiting on the courthouse steps. He had traded his casual clothes for a suit that looked like it hadn't been worn in years. The fabric was slightly too tight across the shoulders. The tie was knotted with military precision. But there was nothing outdated about his bearing. He stood like a man who had faced worse enemies than courtrooms. "Ready?" he asked as Kira approached. "As I'll ever be." "Good, because this is going to be ugly." They walked through the security checkpoint together. Metal detectors, bag searches, the usual procedure. The officers on duty gave Ranger a wide berth, recognizing immediately that this was not a pet. This was something else entirely. The courtroom was smaller than Kira had expected. Wood paneling lined the walls. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Rows of benches filled the gallery, most of them empty at this early hour. The prosecutor's table sat on the left side of the room. Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Morrison was already there, arranging folders and legal pads with the focused intensity of someone who had been preparing for this moment for weeks. She was young, mid-30s, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of lawyer who had chosen prosecution because she believed in something beyond billable hours. The defense table sat on the right, and behind it, in an orange jumpsuit with his wrists shackled to a chain around his waist, sat Donovan Mercer. Kira hadn't seen him since the fair. The months in custody had changed him. His face was thinner, harder. The easy arrogance that had defined his posture was gone, replaced by something coiled and watchful. His eyes scanned the courtroom, constantly, never resting on any single point for more than a few seconds, until they found Kira. Then they stopped, and in that moment Kira saw exactly what Colonel Hartley had warned her about. Not anger, not hatred, obsession. Mercer's lawyer was a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit, the kind of attorney who specialized in cases that required creative interpretation of evidence. His name was Richard Crane, and his reputation preceded him. He had gotten guilty men acquitted before. He intended to do it again. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone rose as Judge Patricia Warren entered and took her seat behind the bench. She was in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human failing the justice system could produce. "Be seated," she said. The hearing began. Ada Morrison presented her case methodically. The incident at the community fair, Kira's statement, the text messages, the pattern of behavior that connected Mercer's past to his present actions. Then she moved to the attack at the VA hospital. The evidence was damning. Security camera footage showed Mercer approaching Robert Finch in the parking lot. Audio captured him taunting Finch about his service dog. Video showed the confrontation escalating. Mercer's fists connecting with Finch's body, the dog trying to intervene, Mercer's boot crashing into the animal's front leg, again and again and again. Kira watched the footage with her jaw clenched. Beside her, Ranger's body had gone rigid. He couldn't see the screen from where he sat, but he could sense Kira's reaction, the acceleration of her heartbeat, the tension radiating from her shoulders. Something bad was happening, something that involved someone like him. When the footage ended, the courtroom was silent. Judge Warren's expression had hardened into stone. "Mr. Crane," she said, "your response?" Crane rose slowly. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, adopted the expression of a man who was about to say something reasonable, despite the unreasonable circumstances. "Your Honor, my client does not dispute that an altercation occurred. However, the prosecution's characterization of events ignores critical context." He gestured toward Mercer. "My client has a documented history of trauma related to military working dogs. During his service in the United States Army, he was attacked by one of these animals. The incident left him with lasting psychological damage, a diagnosis of PTSD specifically triggered by the presence of large dogs in tactical gear." Crane paused for effect. "When Mr. Finch's dog approached my client in an aggressive manner, Mr. Mercer experienced a trauma response. His actions were not premeditated assault. They were instinctive self-defense driven by a psychological condition that the military itself created." Ada Morrison was on her feet immediately. "Objection. The security footage clearly shows that Mr. Finch's dog did not approach the defendant. Mr. Finch was attempting to leave the area when the defendant pursued him." "The footage shows one angle," Crane countered. "My client's perception of the threat was shaped by his trauma. What looks like pursuit to an outside observer felt like escape to a man reliving the worst moment of his life." Judge Warren raised her hand. "Enough. This is a preliminary hearing, not a trial. The question before this court is whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed." She looked at Morrison. "Counselor, do you have additional witnesses?" "Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Kira Holloway." Kira stood. She gave Ranger a single hand signal. "Stay." The dog's eyes followed her as she walked toward the witness stand. His body remained perfectly still, but his attention never wavered. He was watching. He was always watching. Kira placed her hand on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God." "I do." She sat. Ada Morrison approached the stand. "Miss Holloway, can you describe your background for the court?" Kira's voice was steady. "I served 7 years in the United States Navy as a K-9 handler with Joint Special Operations Command. I deployed to Afghanistan multiple times. My K-9 partner Ranger and I completed 38 missions together. We both retired 8 months ago. And on August 14th of this year, you were present at the Riverton Community Fair. Can you describe what happened?" Kira walked through the events, the walkway behind the bleachers, Mercer and his group blocking her path, the confrontation, the shove, Ranger's response. She kept her voice level, factual, let the details speak for themselves. "And after your dog released the defendant, what happened?" "I gave no further commands. Ranger returned to guard position. We waited for police to arrive. I declined to press charges." "Why did you decline?" Kira paused. "Because no one was seriously injured. Because I believed the situation was resolved. Because I thought Mr. Mercer might learn from the experience." She looked directly at Mercer. "I was wrong." Crane rose for cross-examination. His smile was practiced, professional. The kind of expression designed to put witnesses at ease before the trap closed. "Miss Holloway, you testified that your dog executed what you called a controlled clamp on my client's arm. Can you explain what that means?" "It means he immobilized the threat without causing injury. But he did use his teeth on my client's arm. He used pressure, not penetration. There was no blood, no bruising, no lasting marks. Still, the experience must have been terrifying for someone with my client's history of trauma." Kira met Crane's eyes. "Your client's trauma didn't prevent him from approaching me. It didn't prevent him from touching my dog's vest. It didn't prevent him from shoving me when I asked him to step back. If he was experiencing a trauma response, it was remarkably selective." Crane's smile faltered. "You're not a psychologist, Miss Holloway." "No. I'm a combat veteran. I've seen real trauma responses. Men and women who couldn't function when triggered, who froze, who fled, Who broke down completely. She paused. What I saw from your client was not trauma. It was entitlement. He believed he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. That's speculation. That's observation. 7 years of training taught me to read threat behavior. Your client displayed classic predatory patterns, testing boundaries, escalating gradually, enjoying the confrontation. Kira's voice hardened. That's not PTSD. That's something else entirely. Objection, Crane said quickly. The witness is not qualified to make psychological assessments. Sustained, Judge Warren said. Miss Holloway, please confine your testimony to events you directly witnessed. Kira nodded, but the damage was done. Everyone in the courtroom had seen Crane's composure crack. Everyone had seen the truth beneath his careful narrative. The cross-examination continued for another 20 minutes. Crane tried different angles, questioned Kira's training, suggested that Ranger was too aggressive for civilian spaces, implied that the incident at the fair was really her fault for bringing a military dog to a public event. Kira answered each question calmly. She didn't rise to the bait. She didn't lose her temper. She simply told the truth. And when it was over, she returned to her seat beside Colonel Hartley. Well done, he whispered. Ranger's body relaxed slightly, sensing the shift in Kira's tension. He knew she had won something. He just didn't know what. The courtroom doors opened. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Kira turned to see who had entered, and her heart stopped. Colton Webb stood in the doorway, but not the Colton Webb she remembered. Not the nervous young man who had followed Mercer to the fair. Not the haunted kid who had carried 18 years of grief like a stone around his neck. This Colton Webb was wearing the dress uniform of the United States Marine Corps. The eagle globe and anchor gleamed on his collar. His cover was tucked under his arm. His posture was straight. His eyes were clear. He walked down the center aisle with the measured pace of someone who had learned to march in the past months. Someone who had found something worth standing for. Ada Morrison looked up from her notes. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call an additional witness. Colton Webb. Crane was on his feet immediately. Objection. This witness was not disclosed in pretrial discovery. Mr. Webb came forward voluntarily this morning, Morrison replied. His testimony is directly relevant to establishing the defendant's pattern of behavior. The prosecution requests the court's indulgence. Judge Warren considered for a moment. Then she nodded. I'll allow it, but keep it brief, counselor. Colton walked to the witness stand. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down facing the courtroom. His eyes found Kira's. She gave him a small nod. You can do this. Mr. Webb, Morrison began, can you state your relationship to the defendant? We were friends, or I thought we were. We hung out together, went to parties, did stupid stuff that young guys do when they don't have anything better going on. Were you present at the Riverton Community Fair on August 14th? Yes, ma'am. I was with Donovan and two other guys, Garrett and Bennett. Can you describe what happened when you encountered Miss Holloway and her service dog? Colton took a breath. Donovan saw the dog first. He got this look in his eyes, like he recognized something. He said he wanted to have some fun. I thought he just meant messing around, being stupid. But it wasn't that. What was it? He wanted to provoke the dog, get it to react. He kept pushing, touching the vest, getting in the woman's space, and when she tried to leave, he followed her, blocked her path, and then he shoved her. What happened next? The dog responded, but not the way Donovan expected, not the way any of us expected. The dog didn't attack, didn't bite. He just held Donovan's arm, like he was making a point, like he was saying, I could hurt you, but I'm choosing not to. Colton's voice cracked. I've never seen anything like that, and I've never forgotten it. Morrison nodded. Mr. Webb, why are you here today? Why did you decide to come forward? Colton was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Kira, then at Ranger, then at the judge. For 18 years, I blamed military dogs for taking my brother. I was 4 years old when Jake died, too young to understand, old enough to hate. His voice strengthened. My brother was Corporal Jake Webb, Marine K-9 handler, Fallujah, 2006. He and his dog were killed by the same IED. Same blast, same moment. He paused. But I was wrong to blame the dogs. Jake chose to protect his partner. His partner chose to protect him. They died together because that's what real warriors do. They don't abandon each other. They don't turn on each other. He looked directly at Mercer. Donovan Mercer will never understand that kind of loyalty, that kind of honor. He sees these animals as enemies to be destroyed. But they're not enemies. They're family. And the way he treats them, the way he hurts them, that's not trauma. That's cruelty, pure and simple. He turned back to the judge. I enlisted in the Marines 3 weeks after what happened at the fair. Boot camp at San Diego. 13 weeks of the hardest training I've ever experienced. Learning what discipline really means, what sacrifice really costs. He paused. I graduated 2 weeks ago. Next month I start K9 handler training because of what I saw that day, because of what Miss Holloway and Ranger showed me, because I finally understood what my brother Jake knew all along. Morrison stepped back. No further questions, Your Honor. Crane stood slowly. He looked at Colton for a long moment, the young man in the Marine uniform, the brother of a fallen K9 handler, the perfect witness. No questions, Crane said quietly. He knew when he was beaten. Judge Warren cleared her throat. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to proceed to trial. The defendant will remain in custody pending arraignment. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell, and Donovan Mercer was led out of the courtroom in chains. As he passed Kira's row, he turned his head. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Kira saw something she hadn't expected. Defeat. Not the temporary setback of a man who planned to fight another day, but the complete, absolute defeat of a man who had finally realized he couldn't win. The trial took place 3 months later. Kira testified again. So did Colton. So did Robert Finch, the handler Mercer had attacked at the VA hospital. So did 3 other witnesses who had come forward with stories of similar encounters. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Felony assault. Pattern of behavior targeting service animals. Violation of federal laws protecting working dogs. The sentence 8 to 12 years. Donovan Mercer would not hurt another handler. He would not hurt another dog. Not for a very long time. The Pentagon meeting happened 2 weeks after the verdict. Kira flew to Washington with Colonel Hartley at her side. They sat in a conference room surrounded by officers from every branch of the military. Marine K9 coordinators, Army working dog specialists, Navy handlers like herself, Air Force security teams, Coast Guard trainers, all gathered for one purpose, to build something that had never existed before, a unified national standard for military working dogs transitioning to civilian life. The meetings lasted 3 days, long hours of technical discussions, debates about threat assessment protocols, arguments over acceptable force levels, disagreements about certification requirements. But slowly a framework emerged, something comprehensive, something fair, something that honored the service these dogs had given while acknowledging the reality of civilian integration. Kira presented the core principles. These animals are not equipment, she said. They're not weapons to be decommissioned and forgotten. They're partners. They've saved lives, they've sacrificed their health, their safety, their futures for this country. And when they can no longer serve in combat, they deserve a chance to continue serving in other ways. She outlined the 3-stage evaluation process. Stage 1, basic obedience and temperament. Stage 2, controlled stress scenarios with clear non-threats. Stage 3, simulated genuine threats with measured response assessment. The goal isn't to eliminate the dog's protective instincts, she explained. It's to prove that those instincts are governed by judgment, by training, by the bond between handler and dog. Colonel Hartley spoke next. His voice carried the weight of 35 years of experience. I've trained thousands of handlers, he said. I've worked with dogs on 3 continents in 3 different wars, and I can tell you that the bond between handler and canine is unlike anything else in military service. It's not command and obedience. It's partnership, trust, communication without words. He looked around the room. The standards we're creating need to reflect that. They need to honor what these animals have given, and they need to give them a future worthy of their sacrifice. On the final day, a Marine colonel stood to address the room. When this project started, he said, some of us were skeptical. We thought Miss Holloway was too invested, that her personal connection to her K9 would cloud her judgment. He paused. We had it backward. Her investment isn't a liability. It's the whole point. These dogs aren't just assets. They're family. And the standards we're creating need to reflect that. The room applauded. Kira felt tears prick her eyes. She reached down and placed her hand on Ranger's head. He leaned into her touch. We did it, she thought. We actually did it. The first Riverton K9 training center opened 6 months later. 10 acres on the outskirts of town, indoor training bays, outdoor obstacle courses, living quarters for handlers attending the 6-week certification program. Over the entrance hung a sign that Kira had designed herself. Partnership through discipline. Colonel Hartley stood beside her at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, his role as senior advisor officially recognized. You know, he said quietly, when I first saw you at that fair, I thought you were just another handler trying to make it in the civilian world, another veteran who didn't know where she fit anymore. He smiled. I was wrong. You knew exactly where you fit. You just needed someone to help you build it. Kira looked out at the facility, the training bays, the obstacle courses, the living quarters, everything they had built together. I couldn't have done it without you, she said. Yes, you could have. You just would have done it slower. Hartley paused. And with worse coffee, she laughed. The first real laugh she had allowed herself in months. The first class graduated in March. 8 handlers, 8 canines, all certified to the new national standard. All ready to prove that military working dogs could serve beyond the battlefield. Colton Webb was among the graduates. He walked across the platform with a young German shepherd at his side. Saber, a dog with the same focused intensity that Ranger had shown at that age. When he reached Kira, he stopped. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything, for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one, for showing me what my brother saw in these animals, for helping me become someone Jake would have been proud of. Kira shook his hand. Your brother would be proud. I'm certain of that. Colton nodded. Then he looked at Colonel Hartley. And thank you, sir, for teaching me what it really means to serve. Hartley placed his hand on Colton's shoulder. Your brother was a good Marine, a good handler, and now so are you. That's his legacy, son, living in you. Colton's eyes were wet, but his spine was straight. His bearing was proud. He was ready. After the ceremony, families gathered in the courtyard for photographs. Kira spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Ainsley, 10 years old now, taller than she had been at the fair, more confident, more curious. She was standing near the obstacle course with a young Belgian Malinois puppy at her side. His name was Scout, 6 months old, ears too big for his head, paws too big for his legs, but his eyes were sharp, focused, just like Rangers had been at that age. Kira walked over. How's he doing? Ainsley looked up with a grin. He's learning fast. Yesterday, he completed the whole recall sequence without a single mistake, and his nose work is already better than the older dogs. That's impressive. He's impressive. Ainsley's expression grew serious. Aunt Kira, can I ask you something? Of course. Is it hard loving something that might get hurt protecting you? Kira was quiet for a moment. She looked at Ranger, who was lying in the shade nearby. 8 years old now, still sharp, still capable, but slower than he had been, tired more easily than before. The war had taken something from him, something that couldn't be fully restored. Yes, Kira said finally, it's hard, every day. You know that they would give everything for you, their comfort, their safety, their life, and you have to live with that knowledge. Carry it with you. She knelt beside her niece. But that's also what makes it beautiful. The trust, the bond, the partnership. It's not about owning them or controlling them. It's about earning each other, every single day. Ainsley nodded slowly. That's what I thought. She looked at Scout. The puppy looked back at her with absolute devotion. I'm going to earn him, Ainsley said. Every day, no matter what. Kira smiled. I know you will. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the training center had grown quiet, Kira walked Ranger around the perimeter one last time. The sun was setting behind the hills. Orange and gold painted the sky. The air smelled like grass and possibility. They climbed the small hill at the edge of the property, the one that overlooked the entire facility, training bays and obstacle courses, living quarters and administrative buildings, everything they had built together. Kira sat down on the grass. Ranger lay beside her. His head rested on her knee. His breathing was slow, steady, content. "We did something good here," Kira said quietly. "Didn't we, boy?" His body shifted, pressing closer against her leg. Warm, steady, present. The only answer she needed. She thought about the journey that had brought them here. The dark rooms in Afghanistan. The pressure plate 4 inches from her boot. The moment Ranger had used his body as a shield because he trusted his own judgment more than the training protocols. The fair in Riverton. Donovan Mercer's arrogant smile. The shove. The controlled clamp. The silence that had followed. The courtroom. The testimony. The verdict. The sentence. The meetings at the Pentagon. The debates. The compromises. The final standards that would protect dogs like Ranger for generations to come. All of it connected, all of it leading to this moment, this hill, this sunset, this partnership. Colonel Hartley appeared at the base of the hill. He stood there for a moment watching them. Then he nodded once. A gesture of respect, of recognition, of farewell to the day, but not to the mission. He turned and walked away, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the gravel. Kira watched him go. Then she looked down at Ranger. His eyes were closed now, resting, trusting, safe. "You know what makes you different," she whispered. "It's not your speed. It's not your strength. It's not even your training." She stroked his fur gently. "It's your heart. The way you choose restraint over violence. The way you protect without destroying. The way you trust me to make the right call, and I trust you to do the same." She paused. They thought silence was weakness. They thought not reacting was the same as not being capable, but they were wrong. She looked out at the training center below, at the future they had built together. The most dangerous warriors don't need to prove their strength. They don't need to bark or snarl or show their teeth. They just need to know when to act and when to stand down. She smiled. "You taught me that, and now we're teaching the world." Ranger opened his eyes. He looked up at her. For a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, love. Then he closed his eyes again and rested. The stars appeared one by one above Riverton, the same stars that had shone over Afghanistan, over the Pentagon, over courtrooms and training facilities, and coffee shops where old soldiers shared their wisdom with the next generation. Somewhere out there, Colton Webb was beginning his first assignment as a K-9 handler. Somewhere, Ainsley was practicing commands with Scout in her backyard. Somewhere, 8 graduates from the first Riverton class were starting their new lives, their new partnerships, their new purpose. And here on this hill, a woman and her dog sat together in the gathering darkness. 2 warriors, 1 bond, a legacy that would outlast them both. Kira took a deep breath. The California air filled her lungs. She felt Ranger's warmth against her leg, and she knew with absolute certainty that everything they had been through had been worth it. Every mission, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and fear and triumph. It had all led to this, a training center that would change lives, a standard that would protect dogs for generations, a legacy that would live on long after they were gone. "Thank you," she whispered to Ranger, "for everything." He didn't respond with movement or sound. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. It had always been enough. The sun disappeared below the horizon. The last light faded from the sky, and in the darkness, 2 figures sat together on a hilltop, silent, still, complete. When they touched her in front of her K9, they thought silence was weakness. They learned that the most dangerous operators are the ones who never need to prove it. They learned that discipline doesn't bark. It doesn't need to. It simply stands steady, unshakable, ready. And that makes all the difference.